Hey guys, tonight we stumble under lantern smoke and frying grease to find out exactly what medieval street food tasted like. You're about to sink your teeth into something sizzling, a little slippery, and probably questionably legal by modern health codes. You probably won't survive this with a spotless cloak or an unstained conscience, but your belly will be happy enough to argue. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Don't forget to post your location and local time so we can see if you're nibbling in Nebraska or dozing in Delhi. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots scuff over churned mud as you push through a narrow lane where torches hiss above canvas awnings. The air is thick with pepper, wood smoke, and the sharp brine of something just dragged from a river. A vendor in a soot-blackened cap jabs a skewer toward you. 3 fat river eels curled like punctuation marks blistering over a charcoal grate. Oil pops, a tiny spark lands on your sleeve, leaving a smoky kiss. He salts the flesh with a pinch from a pouch at his waist and dusts it with ground pepper that travelled farther than most villagers ever will. Mainstream historical fact: London and Paris street cooks really did hawk hot eels to the night crowd, selling them by length or slice, sometimes laid atop stale trenchers that soaked up juices and doubled as edible plates. You bite, the eel's skin snaps, the meat inside soft and buttery, tinged with river mud but rescued by spice. The vendor presses a trencher into your hand. Yesterday's bread, today's plate. Grease pools, seeping into the crumb. Around you, the marketplace glows in patches. Rushlights gutter in iron brackets. Blue-grey smoke loops around spitted poultry, and pans of onions sweating down to sweetness. A boy hurries past with a jug of ale, foam slopping over, dark and nutty. He trades you a sip for a scrap of eel, a fair swap in this informal economy. Quirky tidbit: some night stalls supposedly reuse trenchers by scraping them clean and handing them to the next hungry soul. Economical, yes, but your stomach flutters at the thought. The vendor swears he feeds leftover bread to pigs, not people. You believe him, mostly. You lean against a post, licking pepper from your lip, and watch an old woman stir a kettle of something greenish and bubbling. Pottage destined for a later section of your wander. But for now the eel rules. Above, laundry lines sway like flags of surrender to grease. Your sleeve carries permanent evidence of tonight's curiosity. You pat the stain as though it's a badge. Historians still argue whether eels were the poor man's meat or a semi-luxury snack prized by anyone with coin. Records list monks ordering barrels of preserved eel, while city ordinances groused about eel pie sellers blocking walkways. Truth, as usual, swims somewhere in between. You tear off more trencher, letting eel fat drip down your wrist. A cat ghosts by, eyes like coals, hoping for a dropped morsel. The vendor taps his skewer on the grate. 3 sharp clicks that mean fresh batch, and a cluster of carters shuffle over, hands outstretched. Competition is polite but intense. Nobody wants the tail pieces unless they're desperate. You catch a tail anyway, savouring the char. The vendor nods approval, muttering that only real night walkers appreciate the crisp bits. Smoke stings your eyes. You blink tears that smell faintly of oak. To your left, a cooper's apprentice argues that pepper ruins the eel, insisting plain salt honours the river. The vendor counters that pepper hides yesterday's catch. A wink slides in your direction. You shrug, mouth full, democratic in your tastes. Torches sputter as a draft tunnels down the lane. Somewhere a bell tolls curfew, but the city guards rarely bother this alley unless a fight breaks out or someone's purse goes missing. Even then, a skewer waved threateningly serves as decent negotiation tool. You shift your weight, feeling warmth of the brazier against your knees. A drop of fat hisses onto coals. The scent doubles your hunger despite your full mouth. One light joke pops into your head, and you let it out softly to the eel man as he fans the flames. If I survive this skewer, do I get a loyalty card or just a tally stick with greasy notches? He barks a laugh, then actually pulls a tiny stick from his belt, carving a notch with a greasy knife before presenting it like a royal decree. You tuck it into your pouch, absurdly pleased. A gust carries whispers of cinnamon from another stall. You make a mental note. Spiced wine awaits, but eel first. You scrape the trencher clean with your thumb and suck it, shameless. while a group of pilgrims mutter about Lenten rules. They eye the eel, debating whether river fish count as penitential fare or indulgent treat. Their leader frowns, their stomachs growl. Eventually they buy 2 skewers for medicinal purposes. You lift an eyebrow. They ignore you. Your eyes trace ribbons of grease on the board. Tonight's story is beginning with fat and fire, but your feet itch to wander. The lane widens into a small square where other foods sizzle. Hand pies puffing, wafer irons clamping shut. But before those, you take one last swallow of ale. It washes down spice and mud, leaving oaky aftertaste and the faint tang of iron. A rooster crows from a rooftop late, confused or ambitious. Someone hushes it with a thrown pebble. The bird scuttles, muttering. You pass the eel stall a final time, handing the cat your last shred of skin. It purrs like a creaking bellows, then vanishes beneath barrels. The vendor lifts his cap in mock salute. You flash the tally stick back at him, a private signal, a silly bond. Pepper still tingles on your tongue as you step into the next vein of the market, senses pried open, ready for pastry secrets and wafer gossip. The torches hiss lower, embers painting cobbles in ember, orange. Your stomach is warm, your hands oily, your curiosity sharpened like the vendor's skewers. You tuck the trencher corner, the part you didn't dare eat, into a rag souvenir, or maybe future pig feed. Either way, you're part of the food chain now, and the chain is deliciously greasy. Somewhere behind you, laughter bursts. Someone miscounted coins, or tripped on a hemp rope. You don't look back. You're already chasing a new smell. Parsley, pork, and something gamey. The night is young, the market restless, and your palate, despite that peppery eel, still hunting. You slide past a brewer's cart, nod to a nun buying onions, and slip under a sign painted with a crude pie. The eel heat still radiates from your cheeks as you inhale oven steam. Your heart thumps a slow, satisfied rhythm, like a drum welcoming you deeper. Lantern glass rattles overhead, a fly buzzes, drunk on sugar. The city exhales, and you inhale back, matching its pace. 1 bite down, 14 sections to go, and a whole street buffet waiting to tell you what survival tastes like when cutlery is optional. You keep moving, but the eel clings to your fingertips like a friendly ghost, so you wipe your hands on the edge of your trencher, then remember the trencher is your plate, and end up licking the smear instead. Resourceful, if not elegant. A brewer's boy barrels past again, sloshing ale across cobbles so the street glitters sticky amber in torchlight. Your boots tack to the ground with each step, as if the lane itself wants to keep you here for second helpings. Someone has upended a busted cask to use as a table, rings of froth dry in pale halos, each one a failed promise of just one more sip. A woman with a tray the size of a shield sails through the knot of bodies, shouting, "Hot trenchers, good bread, yesterday's bake." She slices discs from a coarse round, plunges each into a shallow pan of drippings until they glisten, then flips them onto waiting palms. Mainstream historical fact. These edible plates trenchers were standard at both taverns and high tables, cut from day-old loaves or rye rounds, soaking up sauces before being eaten, fed to servants or tossed to the poor clustered outside hall doors. You trade a clipped penny for one, feel its warmth through crust, bite, crisp edge, soft heart, layers of fat and pepper sinking deep. At your elbow, a cooper argues with a fishmonger about proper ale strength. The cooper claims small beer keeps workers upright. The fishmonger insists stronger ale sterilizes whatever the river leaves behind. You sniff your cup malty, a whisper of smoke, surprisingly clean. Historians still argue whether medieval ale was universally weak small beer, or often strong enough to fog a monk's Latin. Recipe books suggest a spectrum. Parish records hint at watered vats, and tavern tales brag of brews that could fell an ox or a husband. You side with the spectrum theory as a tipsy mason hiccups nearby, clutching a cup that smells like a bonfire, married a raisin. The lane narrows again, forcing you to sidestep into what looks like a drainage trench. Your shoe sinks, not in sewage, thankfully, but in a stew of spilled ale, onion skins and breadcrumbs, a street-level pottage feeding rats and opportunistic chickens. You back out quickly, heel squelching. Ale-stained trenches indeed. You mentally mark the phrase in your diary brain for later flourish. A child with a rag darts in to sop the puddle, wringing it into a bucket. Perhaps for pigs, perhaps don't think about it for more drippings. Quirky tidbit. A few city ordinances complained of cooks reusing drip pans past decency, skimming fat multiple nights until it took on the personality of every meal. Your stomach gives a brave little flip, then settles when a waft of nutmeg teases you from a nearby stall. Before abandoning eel entirely, you detour to a second vendor, whose sign shows a crude fish with legs. Eel pies on offer, encased in thick pastry. He slices a wedge, steam puffs into your face, pepper and parsley dancing with muddy undertones. The crust is lardy and firm, built to travel in saddlebags. You fork a piece with a splintered stick and taste yesterday's river dressed in today's spice, the pastry flaking onto your trencher like snow on stone. Mind the bones, he warns. You nod, tongue already negotiating pin-bone diplomacy. He claims his pies cure chills. You suspect they at least distract you from them. A bell clangs at the end of the square. Curfew reinforcement, but stalls just lower shutters halfway, turning into shadowy confessionals of flavour. You duck beneath one, swapping a joke about loyalty sticks for a refill of ale. This vendor's brew carries a hint of wormwood. Your eyebrows rise. He grins, keeps the humours balanced. You hope so, though your humours feel enthusiastically unbalanced by grease and spice. A group of apprentices in stained aprons cluster around a brazier, fanning coals with broken shingles. They dip hunks of trencher into a shared pan, where eel scraps swim in fat with onions and sage. Communal eating, communal coughs. You edge away before their laughter sprays crumbs across your sleeve. A cat, maybe the same shadow from earlier, launches itself onto the pan. Chaos erupts, onions fly. You catch one in mid-air, blow, bite. Sweet, smoky, slick with the river's leftover soul. In a corner, under an awning patched with sailcloth, a thin man carves tally marks into a willow stick. You realize he's tracking sales for the eel vendor, your notch among them. He grins when you point at the stick. Better than parchment, doesn't soak in the rain, he says. You tuck that in your mind too, wooden bookkeeping holding greasy truth. A night squire, armour half polished and all squeak, eyes the eel stand with aristocratic suspicion, then caves, paying triple for a trencher to avoid mingling elbows. He retreats to a doorway, nibbling like a nervous rabbit. You almost offer him a napkin, non-existent of course, but the image of a mailed gauntlet dabbing grease makes you chuckle internally. There's your one joke quota used, best keep the rest inside tonight. Nearby, someone's playing a bone flute, reedy and thin, selling rhythm more than harmony. A cluster of workers toss him crusts as tips. Food as currency. Again, you tuck that sound beside the sizzle and pop, your mind cataloguing sensory entries. Sizzle, eel, pop, fat, clink, cups, scrape, tally stick, slurp, ale, squelch, trench. The market is a percussion section, and you're in the pit. A husker selling garlic leans over your shoulder, whispering that soaking trenchers in ale before toasting makes them safer. Alcohol as disinfectant. Whether true or just sales pitch, you take note. He presses you a clove for luck. You slip it into your pouch, forgetting that later your fingers will smell like an apothecary's sock. Somewhere a watchman coughs pointedly. Torches lower. Vendors douse coals with ladles of water that hiss like annoyed snakes. You realize your eel vendor has packed up, skewers wrapped, brazier cooling, tally stick tucked. He waves once friend for a night. Gone at dawn's no, morning's grey edge. You mop the last of your trencher with a swipe across the pie crust flake still stuck to your thumb. Then toss the bread heel to a waiting beggar boy. He nods, solemn, as though you've knighted him in breadcrumbs, then vanishes between barrels. You hope someone gives him the onion you caught. As you move, the mud shifts from sticky to rutted, your boots adjusting to the city's pulse. A corner ahead radiates heat and sugar. You haven't hit wafers yet. Patience. First you pause to watch two women arguing over pepper prices, their hands flinging more spice into the air than onto food. Pepper sneezes ripple through the crowd, a medieval sneeze fest. Someone mutters that sneezing expels bad vapors. Maybe the eel saved you after all. You step over a low gutter, careful not to baptize your toes in ale stew again, and find yourself in a lane lit by thinner candles. Darkness thickens, guiding your nose more than your eyes. You let it lead past barrels, a sleeping pig, a toppled stool, until you hit the iron-sweet scent of a wafer iron heating in coals. Your mouth, still haunted by eel, prepares for sugar's absolution. Pepper lingers at the back of your throat. Ale warms your belly. Trencher crumbs cling to your sleeve. You are properly primed, palate awakened, stomach demanding variety. The eel chapter ends, but the fat on your lips writes a footnote that will echo through every new bite. You wipe once more with the ragged corner of your pouch and step into the wafer seller's glow, ready to swap grease for crackling sweetness. Somewhere a rooster, the same off-schedule bird, crows again. Someone tosses it a crumb. You grin in the half-light, thinking of future sections where that bird might reappear, as meddlesome as a magpie at a brooch trial. For now, you let the rooster's confusion be your soundtrack, as you reach out for a circle of batter destined to snap between your teeth and shower crumbs onto the ale-stained stones below. You follow the parsley steam like a divining rod, weaving between barrels until a painted sign, more ambition than artistry, shows a lumpy circle labelled "Pies Hot and Honest." The stall itself is a wooden chest on legs, lid propped, heat trapped by bricks glowing under iron pans. Inside, squat rounds of crusts sit shoulder to shoulder, their vents puffing meaty sighs into the night. The pie woman, biceps like rolling pins, scores another lid with a knife tip, letting green flecks of herb peek through. You lean in. The aroma is pork first, then something featherish, pigeon, crow. You decide you're brave enough to find out. Hand or half, she asks. You pick hand, meaning portable, palm-sized, and currently napalm hot. She flips one to you with a paddle. You juggle it from thumb to fingertip. Trenchers still in memory, but this crust tougher, meant to be gripped. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval coffins, yes, spelled like that, were stout pastry shells built to hold filling and survive travel, often reused or discarded, while smaller chewits and pies were sold in cookshops to hungry workers, portable protein wrapped in lard-rich armor. You bite a corner, steam scalding your lip, pork fat oozes, kissed by parsley, mace and a whisper of pepper that sneezes you back to the eel lane. You chew, noting texture. The meat is minced coarse, some cartilage snap here and there, and definitely a stray pea. As you dissect flavors, a rhyme drifts from the pie woman's helper, half lullaby, half warning. If it clucks or it coos, we mince up the news. If it squeaks or it sniffs, we dice it in fifths. Quirky tidbit. Ballads about mystery fillings were common enough that London ordnance demanded pie sellers display ingredients on signs unenforced, naturally. Her rhyme earns snorts from nearby apprentices, one of whom insists last week's pies tasted suspiciously like cat. She brandishes her knife, swears by St. Martha's ladle. No felines entered her pan. You take another bite, hit a pocket of something iron-rich liver perhaps, and touch the crust with tongue. The lid is glazed with egg, a luxury, or maybe milk, cheaper, sprinkled with coarse salt that crunches like sand. Historians still argue whether street pies reliably contained named meats, or if sellers stretched truth and fillings with cheaper scraps. Court records show fines for adulterated pies, while recipe books describe generous pigeon, beef marrow, even quail. Reality probably sat between good meat early in the week, creative surprises by Saturday night. The pie woman flicks her wrist, popping lids off cooling pies to add more gravy. Gelatinous brown, flecked with sage. She pours from a pitcher that's seen more refills than temple fonts. You feel grease trail down your wrist again. Tonight's theme may be condiment elbows. Remember that eel dribble? Your sleeve sure does. You suck the streak, politely turning away from the lace-capped noblewoman who's pretending she's never licked a forearm in her life. A boy arrives with a basket of pigeons, necks limp, feathers ruffled by earlier wind. He dumps them on the counter. The pie woman plucks deftly, feathers flying into ember light like grey confetti. She tosses the bodies into a cauldron already simmering with pork bones. Light joke bubbles up, and you let it fly gently. At least if the pies lie, the rhyme tells the truth. She snorts, ladle pausing mid-air, then winks, joke quota neatly spent. To your right, an elderly clerk argues the moral status of coffin crusts. If you don't eat the shell, is it wasteful? His companion replies that crust given to the poor counts as alms, not waste. You note it. The ethics of pastry shells, new to your mental pantry. A beggar girl stretches hand. The pie woman drops a discarded lid into it. She grins, gnaws, charity by pastry perimeter. You ask carefully about spices. She taps a jar, mace and a pinch of saffron for show. Saffron. You raise a brow. She smirks. Bought from a cousin's cousin. Totally legal if you squint. Guild regulations on saffron use flutter through your mind like those patchwork laws you saw stitched on Clarion's shame smock. Here the colour polices the palette instead of the wardrobe. Nearby, a scribe sketches with charcoal, capturing the stall, the stack of pies, your flaming cheeks. He's composing a marginal doodle for some illuminated manuscript, no doubt labelling it, "Here comen the pies." He adds a little eel in the corner, a callback you appreciate. You consider telling him about the eel tally stick, but keep your mouth full instead. A frying pan sizzles. Someone's reusing leftover pastry scraps to make quick fritters dusted with honey. The smell cuts through meat fog like church bells through fog. You break off a bit when offered, sweet balm to your savoury swollen tongue. The pie woman slaps your hand, then laughs, handing you an official scrap anyway. Generosity in grease apron form. A guard passes, tapping spear butt on cobbles. Curfew murmured again. Still the pie line snakes. Few fear a fine as much as missing supper. Behind you a pilgrim whispers about Lenten loopholes. Is almond milk pastry permitted? Another section for later. You promise your own stomach. For now, meat rules the trenches and your senses. You bite deeper, hit a peppercorn. Your eyes water, lungs hiccup. The helper pushes you a cup of watered ale. It tastes like memory of hops, but it soothes, and you nod thanks. You dab your lip with the already abused edge of your tunic, ignoring the marinade you're marbling into it. This garment will tell a story tomorrow, each stain a footnote. Ahead, talk shifts to rumours. A rival stall bakes rat in crust. Pie woman snorts. Rats cost more than pork these days. Nobles keep hunting cats. Economic logic as defence. Unexpected but persuasive. You log it. Meat hierarchies by scarcity. A world flipped from yours. A man in a scholar's hood quotes Galen on balanced humours, warning too much pork fuels cola. He buys 2 pies anyway, splits one with his wife. Humours appeased by hunger. You muse medieval wellness influencers. Same worries, different charts. You finish your hand pie, thumb scraping the last gelatinous smear, and toss the lid fragment to a waiting dog who inhales it with gusto. The pie woman is already ladling filling into new shells, hands moving like a loom. You ask her how many pies a night. As many as mouths, she says, and as many as flour sacks allow. Flour is short lately. Late rain, greedy miller, supply chain issues, eternal as hunger. She offers a pêche of nothing, an empty crust brushed with drippings, half price. You decline, remembering trenchers and eel skins. You've had enough starch for now. Instead, you edge toward the wafer iron stall where a confraternity member, in half-monk, half-merchant garb, flips thin batter circles between embossed plates. Sugar glitters in a bowl like contraband snow. As you go, you hum the rhyme. If it clucks or it coos, it sticks, sticky as gravy. Your stomach shifts from heavy to content, ready for crispy, for sweet, for the audible snap of a wafer that doesn't drip on your boots. A final glance back. The pie stall, now a small planet of heat, orbiting bodies feeding, laughing, trading rumours and recipes. The helper chalks a note on the board. Pigeon today, pork tomorrow, no cat ever. Half assurance, half marketing. Historians of the future will scratch their heads at that, you think. You thread through cloaked shoulders, following the sugar plume. Pepper lingers, parsley flecks teeth. A rogue pea hides in molar. You tongue it free, swallow, and step into sweetness. The alley narrows, but light brightens. Wafer sellers no presentation. Iron plates snap shut, and with each clap, your curiosity perks. Grease fades behind you, replaced by honeyed air. Your palate, newly baptized in pork and pigeon, seeks absolution in crisp circles and gossip carried with them. You rub your tally stick, 2 notches now. If pies had loyalty programs, You'd be well on your way to a free lid. You chuckle at the thought, then purse lips. Joke quota met. Back to sensory watchfulness. Ahead bells jingle, not sumptuary shame, but a wafer seller's triangle calling sweet-toothed penitence. You answer, feet quickening, stomach bracing for sugar's snap. The iron plates clap like polite applause, and a ribbon of steam coils into your face, smelling of honey, browned butter, and something floral you can't place until the seller winks and lifts a pinch of rose sugar. He pours a ladle of batter so thin it runs like parchment ink, then brings the patterned plates together with a hiss. When he opens them, a wafer the size of your palm peels away, embossed with vines and tiny saints that look suspiciously like they're sneaking bites themselves. He bends it over a dowel. It cools instantly into a crisp curl that snaps like dry twigs. You reach, it crackles, and crumbs snow down your cloak, joining eel grease and pie gravy in tonight's culinary tapestry. Mainstream historical fact. In late medieval cities, wafers formed semi-official guilds and confraternities, selling thin, sweet wafers at fairs, outside churches, and along feast day processions. Some even supplied noble tables with elaborate layered wafers perfumed with anise or rose. Here, the seller wears half a monk's habit, hooded but with a money pouch jingling and a badge shaped like a tiny iron. He offers you another circle, this one folded into a cone and drizzled with melted honey. You bite, the edge shatters, sweetness blooming fast, chased by spice pricking your tongue, cinnamon maybe, or ginger saved for high days. A girl beside you licks hers with the gravity of a scribe illuminating a margin. The wafer rings a little triangle to announce fresh batches, its ding clear as a chapel bell but far more delicious. Quirky tidbit. Some wafer sellers were rumored to tuck love notes or dice results between stacked wafers, passing secret messages under the pretense of pastry. You glance at yours. Only sugar, unless the note dissolved on your tongue. The seller chats without pausing his wrist. Pour, press, lift, fold. Gossip flowing smoother than batter. He tells you the pie woman's cousin married the eel man's sister, that the brewer waters on Thursdays, that saffron smugglers hide threads in hollow reed flutes. Historians still argue whether wafer sellers functioned as informal news hubs or if that's just romantic hindsight from chroniclers who loved a tidy metaphor. City records do mention wafers fined for idle prating at church doors, but whether talk sold wafers or wafers sold talk remains a debate chewy, as underbaked dough. Your tongue, still haunted by pork fat, revels in clean sweetness. The wafer's embossed saint loses his head between your teeth. You mutter a fast apology. The seller laughs and gifts you a second. For the saint's trouble, you tuck it whole into your pouch, hoping it survives the journey better than your garlic clove. At your elbow, a merchant demands almond wafers for fasting days, arguing almond milk makes anything legal. The wafer obliges, batter pale with ground nuts that smell faintly of orchard. You store that scent away for Section 10's almond milk jellies, your inner narrator already plotting the callback. A breeze pushes smoke aside, revealing two boys crouched by a brazier with a flat iron. They borrowed or stole. Their wafers emerge scorched at edges, part art, part accident. One offers you a malformed circle, free if you'll tell him whether it tastes holy enough. You chomp. It's smoky, thin and oddly savory. Someone forgot the sugar. You nod solemnly, saying it tastes like penance. There's your single light joke, sliding out soft as honey, enough to make the boys snort and the wafer shake his head without losing count of pause. A priest glides past, eyeing the stall. The wafer straightens, offering two delicately rolled tubes on a wooden plate. The priest accepts, murmurs something about not before Vespers, tucks one into his sleeve anyway. Ecclesiastical hypocrisy pairs well with cinnamon, you think, licking a crumb from your lip. Nearby, a woman in a green hood records purchases on yet another tally stick. Tonight has more wood math than a carpenter's dream. She uses notches and burned dots, different systems layered like wafer stacks. You compare it to your eel notch developing a collection that would confuse future archivists. You half consider biting a notch into your wafer just to be consistent, then remember you already ate it. The seller flips to savory. Yes, savory wafers, sprinkling cheese shavings and mustard seed onto one side before folding. The aroma smacks you with a memory of mustard sachets on London streets. Different story, different script. You bite, mustard singing through sugar residue, a duet that shouldn't work but does. Your stomach registers surprise, then approval. Medieval palates adored sweet-savory mashups. Yours is becoming similarly adaptable. A hiccup from somewhere. Someone misjudged ale again. The wafer offers a plain wafer to the hiccuper, swearing the crunch resets breath. Better than scaring with ghosts, he says. You note the cure for future use. Mustard worked once, wafers might too. The hiccuper snaps, swallows, waits, hic, still there. So much for confectionery medicine. Lamplight flickers, catching thin batter in a golden sheet mid-pour. You watch each cycle hypnotically. Ladle dip, iron kiss, steam sigh, plate lift, snap. The rhythm slows your heartbeat, aligning breath with claps. People around you chew in near silence, crunches punctuating the air like polite applause after a lute solo. The calm is almost lullaby-like, market ASMR as promised. You remember the pie rhyme and hum it under your breath, wafer crumble, dusting your tongue. The wafer eyes you, asks if you'd trade the rhyme for a discount. You barter, joke for recipe. He laughs, recipe's a coin. He does reveal a trick, use ale instead of water for extra snap. You grin imagining eel ale wafers. No thank you. Past the stall, a narrow spur of lane leads toward the river, where fish day fritters are rumoured to pop like fireworks in oil. But before heading that way, you savour the last sweet shard, letting it melt to nothing. Your teeth click together, suddenly empty. You lick the cavity clean, committing the ghost of sugar to memory. You watch as the confraternity lads, identical badges, identical grins, shoulder portable braziers. When the triangle rings twice, it means they're moving on, chasing church exits and tavern doors. The wafer's assistant stacks cooled irons, their patterns faintly visible even in soot, vines, saints, a church tower, a fish, symbols to match feast days. You consider how food and faith braid here. Wafers are secular siblings to communion hosts, crisp cousins sold for coin, not salvation. As they pack, a gossiping tanner whispers that wafers cure lovesickness, if eaten under moonlight with a sprig of thyme. You glance up, skies hazy, moon a smudged pearl. You pocket a crumb anyway, insurance. The last ember gets doused with watered wine. Hiss, steam, sweet char scent. The stall shrinks into darkness, leaving only a damp rectangle on cobble. Your tongue grazes sugar grit on a molar, savouring lingering spice. You tilt your head, catching faint music. No shame, flute wheeze this time. Actual melody, drawing you toward the next cluster of stalls where fish must bow to Friday even if it's Thursday. You adjust your cloak, tapping the tally stick in your pouch. Eel notch, pie grease, wafer crumbs, your own edible ledger. Ahead, frying oil pops, pea mash and cod scent, mingle with river damp. Pepper has faded, sweetness softens, appetite resets for something fried and righteous enough for a friar. You step soul sticking less now that sugar coats the ale slick, and let the clatter of ladles guide you. Behind you, the wafer triangle chimes once more. Distant now, like a bedtime bell, the market shifts key, from sweet to savoury, from crackle to sizzle. You follow, stomach a willing pilgrim on this sticky crunchy road. Oil pops like impatient applause as you squeeze into the riverside lane. The air suddenly wetter, saltier, louder. A row of cauldrons squats over charcoal braziers, each spitting flecks of batter into the night. The nearest pan cradles thumb-sized fritters, greenish from mashed peas, flecked white with cod, bobbing like tiny buoys before sinking and resurfacing in crisped glory. A friar with sleeves rolled to scandalous elbows stirs with a wooden rake, face shiny with steam and righteousness. Fish day, he crows, though the calendar swears it's Thursday. Details, details. You trade a farthing and a nod. He slaps 3 fritters into a scrap of parchment already translucent with grease. Steam fogs your nose as you bite. The crust crackles, the inside yields, earthy pea sweetness tangled with briny flakes, pepper nipping your tongue just as it did at the eel cart. You hum approval. The friar beams like he wrote the recipe. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval Christians observed numerous fast days, Fridays, Lent, vigils, eschewing meat but embracing fish, peas and anything that could plausibly be argued not flesh. Street cooks catered to the rhythm, selling fried fish, pea pottages, and Lenten treats sweetened with honey instead of animal fat. A woman beside you eyes a tray of chickpea patties and asks if they're allowed. The friar nods solemnly. Chickpeas swim in the mind of God. His companion rolls her eyes so hard you worry they'll stick. Historians still argue whether these playful loopholes were winked at by clergy or condemned from pulpits. Sermons rail against Lenten gluttony, yet recipe collections bristle with almond milk custards and faux fish made from Satan-like wheat gluten. Loopholes are as medieval as trenchers and tally sticks. You juggle fritters from hand to hand. They cool fast, losing their siren hiss but keeping crunch. A boy sprinkles powdered herbs, savory and hyssop over your portion for luck, or maybe for upsell. Quirky tidbit. Some vendors dyed fritter batter with parsley or spinach so it looked more alive, claiming fresh color meant fresher fish. You glance at your green crumbs, grin and hope tonight's glow is herb, not algae. Across the lane, a widow fries wafer-thin slivers of eel skin. Hello again, old friend, as chips for those who missed the skewers. You catch a whiff, wave, and she waves back with greasy tongs. Community built on shared oil. Your sleeve absorbs a new constellation of dots. Tomorrow's laundry is going to tell a saga. The friar thrusts a second batch at you, gratis for piety. You protest half-heartedly. He insists, sliding a wink that says he's counting this as alms. You tuck two into your pouch next to the surviving wafer cone, sweet and savory, now sharing quarters, future crumbs armed for war. Oil splatters your knuckles, you hiss, sucking a peppered bubble. Flashback to hot iron ordeals, minus the divine verdict. A nearby tanner jokes that the friar's oil has seen more Fridays than his prayer book. You smirk, but keep your single allotted joke holstered. You spent it at the wafer stall. Discipline, unlike batter, must hold shape. A constable wanders through, sniffing like a bloodhound for meat violators. He pokes at a suspiciously plump fritter. Steam reveals pea mush, not pork. Satisfied, he buys 6. Hypocrisy goes well with hyssop. Your tally stick taps against your pouch. You consider carving a pea-shaped notch but resist. Wood only has so much real estate. Beyond the friar, another pan sizzles with frittelle di meli, apple fritters. Tiny moons dusted in sugar that spark under torchlight. Not fish, but fruit gets a pass. You snag one, tongue singing at the heat. Sugar clinging to eel grease in an unholy alliance. Fast day or feast day, who can tell when batter is this democratic? A debate brews beside the brazier. One merchant insists frying counts as boiling, thus holier. Another says oil's expense alone sanctifies it. The friar shrugs. St. Lawrence was grilled, God understands. You file the line for later, admiring theological agility. The oil pops louder as if applauding his exegesis. Somewhere upriver, a bell tolls. Same bell that banished Roderick. The sound drifts thin, stretched by mist. The lane hushes for a heartbeat, then resumes its chew and chatter. You pop another fritter, feel cod fibers flake against teeth. A bone pricks gum. You spit discreetly, flicking the offender into fire. It sizzles out of existence. Bone to smoke, sin to ash. Behind you, a baker's boy repurposes leftover pea mash into patties, slapping them on a griddle greased with yesterday's lard. Fast day be damned. He whispers, don't tell, as he slides one to a labourer. You shake your head at the culinary heresy, and at your own willingness to taste if offered. A minnow of doubt swims your belly. Too much oil. You chase it with a swallow of watered cider from a communal ladle, wiped on apron between sips, sanitation medieval style. The cider's tartness cuts the fat, mouth reset again. A cat patrols the gutter edge, tail twitching, eyes calculating drop distance to the fritter pan. The friar spots it, flings a pea pellet. The cat retreats, dignity intact. You remember the pie stall's cat rumours and smile. Tonight's felines survive in rumour alone. The lane's heat wraps your cheeks. You step back, letting cooler river air thread between stalls. A boat bumps against posts, crew trading oysters for fritters, barter that smells like tide and time. You file oysters under future section 9, feeling like your own outline is a menu you keep rereading. The friar's helper bangs an empty pan, announcing last batch before curfew proper. People surge. You get elbowed by a mason clutching 5 fritters like gold coins. He drops one. You tow it back to him. Fair's fair. As the oil dwindles, the friar tips the pan, letting dregs hiss into sand. The smell burnt pea, fish ghosts rises then dies. He wipes hands on robe already stained in every Lenten hue. He offers a blessing that sounds suspiciously like a sales pitch for tomorrow. Return with empty belly and clean conscience. You salute with your last fritter, bite, savor the cooling crunch. Your stomach, a ledger of textures now. Snap wafer, chew pie, slick eel, crackle fritter, registers fullness but not defeat. You rub the spot just below ribs where medieval indigestion would lodge and promise yourself a mint posset at sunrise. Outline spoiler, section 15. You wander, fritter paper crackling in hand, toward the glow of mulled wine. Sugar whispers fade, oil sizzle quiets, pepper ghost lingers. The friar douses one final ember, crossing himself with greasy fingers. Holiness wears many coats tonight, some edible. As you leave, the chickpea vendor waves a ladle. Remember, they swim in the mind of God. You wave back, tapping your temple as if checking for gills. The woman who rolled her eyes earlier snorts, muttering that peas sink just fine. Debate trails you like frying smoke. Your boots meet drier cobbles as the lane widens, and warmth from kettles gives way to the glow of brass pots filled with spiced wine and cider. A minstrel tunes quietly, hoping for tips in crusts or coin. You lick the last crumb from your finger, tuck the greasy parchment into a crack in the wall in case rats need reading material, and step into nutmeg mist. Behind you, oil sets pans cool, pea mash crusts onto iron. Tomorrow's scrape, tomorrow's flavor, eternal cycle in a single skillet. Your palate hums along, ready for cloves, cinnamon, and the rumor that cloves block plague. Wishful chewing or early epidemiology, we'll taste and see. Brass kettles bead with fragrant sweat, their domed lids rattling as if eager to gossip. You edge closer, cheeks flushed from fritter steam, and let nutmeg, clove, and citrus peel climb straight into your sinuses like tiny ladder thieves. A wiry woman in a soot-smudged wimple ladles deep ruby liquid into a wooden cup, the surface shimmering with a slick of melted honey. She calls it hippocras, and the name alone feels like velvet on the tongue. You sip, warmth unfurls from palate to fingertips, cloves prickling like polite pins while cinnamon purrs underneath. Mainstream historical fact. Late medieval recipe books brim with spiced wines, hippocras and piment, strained through cloth, sweetened heavily, and served at the end of feasts or sold to street crowds as cure, comfort, or both. To your left, a cooper-turned-cidermonger jabs a red-hot poker into a bucket of cider. It hisses, spits sparks, and suddenly smells of baked apples and iron. He swears the poker burns off bad vapors and caramelizes the juice. You test the theory with a cautious sip. It tastes like orchard smoke and church incense held hands. A curl of steam fogs your lashes. You blink tears that carry faint echoes of eel pepper and pie mace, now soothed by honey. Historians still argue whether these perfumes of spice mainly masked sour wine, flaunted wealth, or genuinely chased off illness. Account rolls show cheap vintages getting the clove treatment, but household manuals insist on precise spice ratios for stomach settling and humours balancing. Truth, like nutmeg, was imported and expensive. A bearded apothecary has set up next door, hawking spice packets tied with string. He demonstrates a plague pouch stuffed with cloves, rosemary, and juniper to hang around your neck. The cider man mutters that drinking the stuff works better than sniffing it. Quirky tidbit: one Paris vendor supposedly floated toasted bread in mulled wine, selling the soggy slice as a separate snack. Some claim that's where raising a toast began. You eye a lonely crust bobbing in a pot and file the thought, unsure if etymology tastes like damp bread. Your cup warms your palms, and your shoulders drop a notch. The lane is softer here. Fewer shouts, more murmurs, people cupping drinks close as if guarding tiny hearths. A minstrel plucks a lullaby near the brazier, taking pie crust instead of coins. You slide him a fritter scrap. He nods mid-phrase, mouth stretching into appreciative hymn. One light joke sneaks out of you to the apothecary. If cloves cure everything, Should I rub them on my eel stain? He nearly snorts spice dust, then recovers, offering you a clove to chew for virtue. You accept, crunch, immediately regret the numb tingle. Virtue tastes like furniture polish. Joke quota spent. Muzzle it from here. The hippocras seller pours from height, threading wine in a ruby ribbon that gleams against torchlight. Her wrists roll like a weaver's shuttle, never spilling, never pausing. She uses 2 cloth strainers, one coarse, one fine, tugging them like stockings over the jug mouth. You imagine the fabric's spice-stained history, every batch a palimpsest, flavors ghosting through. A clerk complains that cloth filtering wastes wine. She retorts that sediment is for goats. You side with her when a grit lump sticks to his lip. Behind, a barrel of sucket candied peel glows amber. The seller spears a strip with a twig, dangling it over your cider. Citrus oil bursts, riding steam into your brain. Mediterranean sun sneaks into this cold river town, smuggled in rind and clove. You remember the wafer's rose sugar and decide this is sweetness's deeper, smokier cousin. A monk in patched brown scrutinizes the spice jars like they're theological treatises. He whispers that nutmeg costs more than sinners' fines. The seller laughs, quoting a price that could buy 3 eels and a half pie. Scarcity drapes each cup in status. Yet here you are, elbow to elbow with masons and millers, all sipping the same ruby warmth, a brief democracy of taste. The cidermonger offers a variant for aching bones. Cider, honey, mustard seed, there's our old friend, and a raw egg yolk whisked in. It glows like liquid sunrise. You watch a carter down one, grimace, then smile with eyes half closed. He swears his back already loosens. Whether mustard cures hiccups or cider cures vertebrae, the crowd loves a remedy that tastes like dessert. A gust lifts your cloak edge, revealing the pie grease galaxy. The hippocras woman eyes the constellation and slides you a sliver of sugared almond to sweeten what stains. Almond's milky bloom spreads across your tongue, presaging Section 10's jellies. Your teeth sink, a crunch, then melt. Texture choreography continues. 2 scholars debate dosage. Does too much clove heat the blood to rashness? One cites Avicenna, the other cites his own stomach. Historians still argue if medieval folk believed in humoral theory or simply used it as vocabulary for vibes. Either way, tonight's market talks warm, cold, wet, dry like weather forecasts. You wrap hands tighter around cup. Wet heat feels just right after fritter crackle. A pair of washerwomen trade gossip with the hippocras seller. Apparently the wafer confraternity doubled prices last feast day, blaming sugar tariffs. The seller snorts, knocks 2 cloves into your refill on the house. Price wars executed in spice. You inhale again, clove tickles, but this time sits politely in the back of throat like a bishop at a tavern. Nearby, a boy dunks his stale trencher heel into the mulled cider, reviving it into dessert. He grins, half his face honey-glossed. You wink. He shrugs. Waste not. Another reminder that trenchers live many lives. Plate, pig feed, dessert sponge. You recall your own trencher scrap, jammed into a wall crack, and briefly consider rescuing it for cider duty. No, boundaries. The cidermonger knocks his poker against barrel rim clang, announcing last call. Steam swirls like ghosts evicted from cups. People crowd in, coins clink. A glove drops, instantly sticky. You fish it up, hand it back, fingers now perfumed with clove and unknown glove history. Lavender water will have overtime later. Your hip brushes a crate of apples. One rolls free, bumps your boot. You pick it up, skin taut, dappled. The seller grins. Mull it yourself next time. You tuck the apple in your pouch. Wafer cone, fritter grease, apple. Tonight's pantry rattles. A lull flows over the lane. Spiced breath fogs the air, then thins as cups drain. The minstrel's lullaby lingers on one last note, falls silent. You set your empty cup on a barrel, wiping honey from lip with the inside of your sleeve, which now qualifies as a seasoning chart. The hippocras seller snuffs a torch, shadows swallowing her stall until only ember eyes remain under the kettle. You step away, warmth pooled in belly, cheeks tingling, nose humming of clove. Ahead, sausage smoke spirals into the cold, iron-rich and promising. Your palate, freshly sugared and perfumed, braces for char and offal. Pepper ghosts, clove saints, mustard memories, all jostle playfully as you slip into the next alley, where links sway like garlands and blood puddings gleam in torchlight. Behind you, the last ladle echoes against kettle bottom. Hollow, satisfied, someone toasts the empty pot with a crust. The word toast floats after you, bread bobbing in wine like a buoy on a sea of etymology. You smile to yourself, letting it sink without splash. Your boots hit cobbles still tacky with cider drips. They pull slightly, then let go, a gentle tether reminding you of sweetness. But sausage sizzle cuts through, summoning you forward. The market shifts key again, from spice to smoke, from cup warmth to charcoal heat. You roll your shoulders, ready to taste what thrift and nose-to-tail cooking really mean when every scrap meets the pan. Smoke braids around strings of sausages dangling from a makeshift rack, each link glistening like rosary beads for the church of charcoal. You edge closer, hips brushing a barrel where rendered fat gathers in a tin pail, popping and sighing like it has opinions. The butcher, forearms the size of loaves, turns a grill grate with a hooked iron, exposing rows of pork and herb coils, sheep gut casings snapping as they blister. Beside them, squat puddings, inky, glossy, simmer in a shallow pan, their surfaces trembling as bubbles kiss the skin. Your belly, half wine and fritter, makes room with a resigned groan. He spears a sausage, plops it onto a splintered board, and saws off a length with a blade honed on bone. The slice lands in your palm, hot enough to make you juggle. Grease slicks your fingers instantly, a familiar sensation tonight. Bite char gives way to juicy crumble. Pepper again, of course. Sage whispering through, maybe coriander if he's feeling fancy. Mainstream historical fact: medieval butchers and cook shops sold sausages and blood puddings as street fare, especially after slaughter days, stuffing minced meat, fat, oats and spices into cleaned intestines, then smoking or boiling them for quick sale. City statutes from London and Nuremberg alike regulated sausage size, content and sale hours, proof the link between law and links was literal. A girl with flour on her cheek eyes the black puddings suspiciously. The butcher grins, slices her a coin-thick round. Steam lifts, iron-rich and oat-thick. She tastes, pauses, nods, convert made, quirky tidbit. Some fairgrounds-held pudding pulls, where couples tugged on a long blood sausage to see where it snapped, omens for fortune or fertility, depending which end you got. You imagine the friar from the fritter lane, sermonizing about sanctified casings, then snort internally, save the official joke for later. You ask the butcher about casings. He holds up a length, translucent in the firelight. Cleaned twice, once in river, once in vinegar, he boasts. You choose to believe the vinegar part, while your nose tells you the river did most of the work. Historians still argue whether offal stalls were strictly lower-class necessity, or celebrated examples of nose-to-tail thrift enjoyed across strata. Household accounts show nobles eating spiced liver sausages, while guild minutes complain of apprentices clogging alleys around gut boilers. Reality, as with eels and pies, straddles coin purses and appetites. A pair of apprentices string fresh links over a beam, tying knots with sprigs of rosemary like festive garlands. The green needles hiss when stray sparks land, perfume on the cheap. Another pan holds something pale, liver sausage, poaching gently. You lift a brow, the butcher nods. For those who fear the dark, he winks. You decide not to fear anything at this point. Your stomach's already a medieval parliament of flavors bickering amiably. He flicks ash off the grate and hands you a wedge of black pudding scored in a cross. It's dense, oat-grained, coppery sweet. You chew slowly, letting texture map your tongue. Crumbly center, taut skin, pepper heat building late. A child nearby squeezes her nose, dramatic. Her mother rolls eyes, swaps the slice for a bite of pale sausage. The child chews, eyes widen, victory for variety. Your light joke arrives. Gentle as steam. So if I eat the whole chain, does that make me the weakest link? The butcher barks a laugh, nearly dropping his knife. A cooper behind you groans happily. Joke quota met. Mouth back to tasting. On a side table, a crock of mustard sits coarse, nose prickling. You dab a dot with a splintery stick, smear it over sausage end. Mustard again, your old hiccup fighter friend, clears lingering clove ghosts from hippocras. The combo sings, and you hum involuntarily. The minstrel 2 stalls back hears and echoes the note on his lute, a playful call and response. 2 scholars argue at your flank. Is blood hot in humoral terms, thus dangerous to choleric temperaments? One quotes a physician who banned black pudding after Michaelmas. The other shrugs, mouth full, claiming oats temper the heat. You side-eye your stomach, decide oats win tonight. A tanner pipes up that sausage is safer than loose meat, sealed, spiced, smoked, less rot, more profit. The butcher beams, free marketing. A housewife steps up with her own casing loop, bartering fat trimmings for grill time. He throws it on, she flicks a pinch of something from a pouch, possibly mace or maybe hope. Communal grills blur lines, vendor, customer, co-chef. You tuck that thought for the diary. Behind the stall, a boy scrapes coagulated fat into a clay jar labeled for lamps. Nothing wasted. Tonight's sausage becomes tomorrow's light. That detail warms you almost as much as the hippocras. Efficiency glistens here as much as grease. Steam fogs your view. You wipe sleeve, now officially a spice chart, and catch sight of a dog circling the drip bucket. The butcher snaps fingers. The dog sits, tail thudding. He tosses a burnt nub. Dog devours it, licking snout with theatrical gratitude. Someone mutters the dog eats better than monks. A monk appears, raises eyebrow, receives a pale sausage slice for silence. Barter complete. A flurry at the lane's far end. Constables again? No, just the cider poker clanging a goodbye. The butcher lifts a link in salute. Vendors cross-pollinate gestures like bees. You realize how intertwined these stalls are. Eel skins in fritters, sausage fat in lamps, trenchers in cider, spices in everything. The market's ecosystem hums like a stew pot. You ask quietly about banned meats. He leans in. Horse if times are bad, but never tell the guild. Your stomach tilts. He laughs, claps your shoulder, assures today's pig, yesterday's sheep. Quirky tidbit tucked away. Some chronicles mention equine pies during famine years, adaptation in pastry again. Grease trails down your wrist, déjà vu. So you drag finger across a stale bread heel, sitting conveniently on the counter. He nods, approves your resourcefulness, then tosses the heel into a stew pot for tomorrow's pottage. Bread never dies, it just changes chapters. The fire flares as fresh charcoal feeds it. Sparks fly like frantic fireflies. You lean back, watching links sway. The scent of smoke settles deeper into your cloak fabric. A souvenir laundry can't fully evict. Pepper numbs your lips slightly. You sip air, tasting ash and clove from earlier cups. Layers upon layers. The butcher rings a handbell. Funny how bells rule everything tonight, signaling last sausages before curfew's fine bites harder than mustard. People surge. You step aside, pocketing a small end piece for later nibble, a midnight insurance policy. He notices, winks, carves you a bonus sliver, hospitality paid in fat. As flames dim, he scrapes the grate, scooping cracklings into a pottery bowl sold cheap to mothers stretching stews. The black puddings come off, stacked like cannonballs, cooling. He wipes blade on apron, then on a scrap of cabbage leaf, green stain on steel, then sheathes it with a sigh. Another day, another gut. You turn away, mouth tingling, heart warm, stomach full but pliant. Somewhere down lane, a lentil cake vendor is shouting about 2p bargains. Your outline brain pings. Section 8 awaits. Time to swap off for legumes. Grease for garlic, links for patties. You pass the apothecary again. He pinches his nose, mutters about vulgar effluvia, then buys a sausage end for research. You smile without words. Lavender water will fight an uphill battle tonight, but that's future you's problem. Present you follows the faint earthy scent of lentils, sizzling on an iron plate. Behind, the butcher snuffs the brazier with a lid, sealing smoke inside like a kept secret. The lane exhales, and so do you, stepping into cooler air where the sizzle softens to a gentle hiss. Fat crackle fades, replaced by the soft plop of batter on griddle. Your palate resets again, marveling at its own stamina. You finger the tally stick. No room for a sausage notch unless you whittle an extra edge. Maybe the lentil man will lend a knife, or maybe the stick itself will snap under the weight of tonight's tastes. Either way, it's a good problem. Problems that smell like sage and pepper rarely ruin sleep. Grease ghosts still perfume your sleeve when a new smell slips under the charcoal haze. Earthy, garlicky, almost floral if beans could bloom. You follow it to a squat brazier where a flat iron plate sweats over coals. A woman in a faded pilgrim badge hat, a scallop shell turned soot black, slaps brownish patties onto the heat, each one hissing like a cat at a dripping gutter. She catches your eye, lifts 2 fingers, 2 pence, 2 cakes, fair as St. James's Road. You fish a coin, warm from your cider-heated palm, and trade it for a scrap of parchment sagging under the weight of lentil cakes. They're rough-edged, pan-flattened, crisped in spots where oil pooled, soft in the middle where mashed lentils cling to chopped garlic, and a whisper of leek. You bite, the crust crackles, giving way to creamy crumble that coats your tongue in nutty warmth, garlic marching in politely instead of raiding, a drizzle of something tangy, maybe verjuice, flares across the top, and suddenly your palate, which has been juggling eel, pie, wafer, fritter, wine and sausage, sighs a small thank you for legume simplicity. Mainstream historical fact: pulses, lentils, peas, fava beans were medieval staples, especially for the poor and on fast days when meat and dairy were off the table. Account books and monastic rules list them in quantities that would make a modern salad bar blush. Street cooks turned them into patties and puddings, cheap fuel you could hold in one hand while the other counted prayer beads or pennies. The vendor leans close, conspiratorial. Pilgrims made these first, she says, tapping her scallop shell. Long roads, empty purses. Lentils keep longer than pride. She flips a cake, oil spattering her wrist. She doesn't flinch. You arch a brow, filing her origin story under possible poetic. Historians still argue whether such patties were true pilgrim inventions or just common cookshop fare, rebranded for holy traffic. Guild minutes grumble about false pilgrim dishes sold at city gates, while chronicles from Compostela mention stew, not cakes. Truth travelled as far and wide as scallop shells did. She presses another blob flat with her palm, then pokes 3 holes in it so it breathes, she says. Quirky tidbit. Some cooks swore poking holy symbols, or just neat vents, kept patties from exploding their humours, a superstition that's really just steam logic in saintly language. Steam jets through, sizzling garlic onto the iron in aromatic arrows that lead every nose within 5 paces straight to her stall. A pilgrim with dust-black ankles and a badge from Canterbury shuffles up, fingering his purse. He claims the patties cure blisters if held under the heel before eating. The vendor snorts, slides him one anyway. He actually does it, presses the hot cake to his foot, yelps, then bites. You watch, eyebrows making the sign of the cross. He grins through the pain, penance à la plate. You flip your cake over on the parchment to sop stray oil, noticing tiny flecks of something red. Paprika centuries early. More likely saffron crumbs hitchhiking from the bun stall, or a pinch of ground rose hips. The vendor won't say. Lips tight, eyes playful. Recipes are currency, secrets are seasoning. The brazier pops. A stray coal leaps, landing near your boot. You step aside, heel-crunching pea husks tossed down as fuel. Nothing wasted, not wood, not bean skins, not breath. She scrapes the iron with the side of a wooden spatula, pushing crisp bits into a corner pot. Tomorrow's pottage thickener. You catch the motion. Tonight's leftover becomes tomorrow's body. Efficiency keeps the market humming like a well-stirred stew. Your tally stick taps your pouch. No room left for a lentil notch unless you carve along the edge. You borrow her knife handle, slick with oil, shave a tiny groove. She watches amused. Counting sins or suppers, she asks. You shrug, mouth busy, brain filing the line under later wind-down wisdom. A clerk nearby debates prices. Were 2 pence fair or extortion? He cites last week's market roll. She counters with this week's rain-ruined pea crop. You sniff your cake. Garlic's assertive swagger says she earns every coin. The clerk pays anyway, grumbling, then eats with gusto that undermines his complaint. Someone asks if eggs bind the mix. She shakes her head. Lenten lawful, she insists, though tonight isn't a fast night. Habit or marketing? You chew, tasting only lentil starch, holding it together like pottage without broth. A woman in a linen coif swears by adding stale crumbs soaked in ale. The vendor can't be bothered. Bread is for trenchers, not thieves of texture. A gust from the river carries oyster brine. You clock it. Section 9 on the horizon. Your palate braces for cold salt after warm legumes. But here warmth rules. Cakes stacked at brazier edge, ready to flip to life. A small boy licks oil from parchment, eyes closing in bliss that transcends class and theology. You hand him half your second cake. He nods solemnly, debt of gratitude paid in crumbs. The vendor tosses a handful of chopped herbs, parsley, maybe lovage, onto the plate, just before lifting the next round. They crisp instantly, sticking like edible confetti. She sprinkles a pinch of coarse salt from a pouch sewn inside her sleeve. Salt is money, literally, and she guards it like relic bone. Your light joke chooses now, soft as steam. If pilgrims invented these, does that make my stomach holy ground? She barks a laugh, slapping the spatula against the brazier rim, so loud a nearby rooster startles. Joke quota sealed, lips back to tasting. A gouty merchant waddles up, swearing legumes temper his humours better than any doctor. He buys 4, wraps them in parchment, and tucks them under his cap to keep warm. Steam coils around his bald spot. You bite your tongue to keep from offering seasoning advice. The vendor rolls her eyes to the heavens or the smoke-blackened awning, then ladles verjuice over your last bite. The acid snaps your taste buds awake like a watchman's cudgel on a sleepy shoulder. At the fringe of the stall, a jar of garlic confit glows faintly. You dip a fingertip, smear a dot on the cake, buttery, mellow, all the bite cooked out. She pretends not to see, you pretend it's accidental. Mutual culinary amnesty. Somewhere behind, the sausage man bangs his pan one last time. The friar hums a psalm. The hippocras seller coughs clove. The market is winding down, but your night nibbling marches on. You fold your parchment, licking oil shining on the crease, and hand the scrap back for her scrap pot. She nods approval. Waste returned is favour earned. You step away, stomach content but curious. Tongue slick with garlic, mind already salivating at the thought of cold brine and sharp shells. A shout rises from the wharf. Oysters, buckets, cheap as puddles. The river calls, and with it, a taste that slides rather than crunches. Behind you, the lentil brazier hisses as she douses coals with a splash of ale too stale to drink. Steam spikes garlic into the air one last time, a fragrant benediction. You breathe it in, chest warm, shoulders loose, tally stick heavier by one invisible groove. Cobblestones tilt toward the water, reflecting lantern light like melted saffron. You follow the slope, each step an echo of crunch, snap, crackle, slurp, tonight's rhythm section. Lentils fade on your tongue, replaced by river anticipation. Time for oysters to argue with poor man's beef, and noble slurps, and for your teeth to meet shell, not crust. Buckets thump against the quay like lazy drums, and a chorus of fresh from the mud ricochets off warehouse walls as you emerge onto the wharf. Lanterns swing on ropes, throwing buttery light over mounds of shells that glitter like broken moons. A woman in a salt-stiff apron hefts a wooden pail brimming with oysters, mud-flecked, ridged, smelling of tide and tin. She plants it on a barrel top, wedges a blunt knife between 2 shells, and twists with a pop that sends brine arcing onto your boot. Lucky splash, she grins. You hope your leather agrees. She plops the opened oyster onto a shard of trencher bread. Again, eternal understudy. Sprinkles coarse salt, a pinch of pepper, because pepper is apparently the city's official religion, and with a flourish, a drip of sour green verjuice from a cracked jug. You tip it into your mouth. The flesh slides, cool, silky, a burst of iron and seaweed, and then the pepper cough kicks, familiar now as an old tavern song. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval London, Paris, and coastal towns across Europe, oysters were cheap and abundant, often called the poor man's beef, sold by the bucket to labourers and by the cartload to monasteries on fast days. Archaeological heaps of shells, middens, ring old ports, proof that half the city slurped with you. Nobles loved them too. Household rolls list barrels of oysters sent upriver on ice. Democracy in a shell, until overfishing centuries later ruined the party. You shuffle aside as another vendor smacks shells into neat piles. counting not by individual oyster but by hundreds, measured in pecks and bushels. Quirky tidbit: some sellers strung empty shells onto cords to tally sales, wearing oyster necklaces like greasy trophies at day's end. You consider adding one to your tally stick collection, then realize your pouch already clinks with apple and wafer cone. Best not push capacity. The vendor's kid threads shells anyway, dangling them like wind chimes that smell like low tide. A fisherman with river reed hair insists cooking ruins oyster's soul, while his wife ladles a cauldron of oyster pottage thickened with ale and oats, daring him to call her soulless. You taste a spoon, creamy, smoky, the oysters diced to pearls inside. Historians still argue whether raw oysters were everyday fuel or special fare, and whether urban riverbeds were clean enough to trust. Court records note fines for dumping dung near beds, but also complain of belly flux after bad batches. Some chroniclers praise oysters as winter staples, others sniff that real feasts served lampreys instead. As usual, truth clings to both boats. You slurp another raw one. Brine shocks your tongue awake after lentil warmth, a palate plunge into cold surf. A gull dive bombs the barrel, snatching a shell, nearly scalping the pepper jar. The vendor swats it with her knife handle. The gull drops its prize, cawing insults. You dodge airborne shell, muttering thanks to St. Cuthbert that helmets are not required eating gear. Your light joke slips out to the fisherman. Does the gull pay by the beak or just run a tab? He barks a laugh, nearly drops his net. Quota spent, lips back to respectful slurping. Beside you, a clerk notes prices on. Yes, another tally stick. He burns a notch with a coal for every dozen sold. Smoke curls from wood, carrying oyster funk into incense territory. You tap your own stick through your cloak, half tempted to sear an oyster mark. The clerk eyes you, offers the coal. You decline. One smoky scar is enough for one night's wardrobe. Further down, a tinker hawks oyster sauce, in clay pots, essentially vinegar, pepper and mashed oyster liquor. He claims it cures melancholy when dabbed behind the ears. The apothecary from Hippocras Lane materializes to scoff, then buys 2 pots for study. You watch him smear a bit on a cuticle. He hisses, declares it invigorating. Quirky remedies breed like rats on these docks. A monk with mud on hem debates a sailor about oysters on feast days. The monk says yes, the sailor says always. The friar from the fritter lane wanders in, pinches an oyster between finger and thumb, declares it swimming in the mind of God, then promptly drops it, laughing at his own line recycled. You grin despite yourself. Repetition in markets and scripts alike can be oddly comforting. A girl no taller than the bucket top wraps shells with a mallet, cracking stubborn seams. She salts with practiced flicks 2 grains per oyster, never 3. For luck, she insists. You swallow, counting grains on your tongue like fortunes. 2, safe harbor. 3, stormy guts. Superstition tastes of salt and numbers tonight. Your sleeve, already a mural of grease and spice, takes on a briny sheen as you wipe a drip. Lavender water is getting quite the to-do list. You glance at the river, dark, slick, retching softly against pilings. Boats bob, lit by pinprick lanterns. Men hurling nets that whisper against water. Somewhere, a bell on a buoy clangs. Another bell, another boundary. You think of Roderick's exile bell and wonder if sound travels better over salt. An old woman sells tiny knives carved from bone. For dainty ladies' oysters, she croaks. Yet the dainty lady currently elbow-deep in a bucket is Mistress Clarion. Bells removed, patchwork smock off, plain cloak on. She downs 3 in a row, then wipes her mouth with the back of her hand like a dockhand. Humility sticks better when salted, apparently. You lift your cup of leftover cider in salute. She nods, almost smiles, then vanishes into fog. At the edge of the quail, brazier sputters with skewered mussels. Oysters' less glamorous cousins. A boy roasts them, tossing in handfuls of seaweed for steam. You try one. Chewier, meatier, flavored like the dock rope smells. He claims nobles hate chewing. You chew anyway, grateful for a break from sliding textures. A cart creaks by, loaded with crushed shells destined for lime kilns. Mainstream aside, shell middens were burned to make quicklime for mortar, so your oyster tonight may become tomorrow's cathedral wall. Edible architecture, you muse. a callback to the treadwheel debtors lifting stones. Everything feeds something else here. Bellies, buildings, lamps, ledgers. A constable peers into buckets, sniffing for rot. The vendor flicks a bad one into the river without breaking eye contact. The splash seems to satisfy his authority. He slurps to himself for inspection, peppering liberally. Law enforcement with perks. Wind rises, lanterns sway, throwing jellyfish shadows over plank boards. You tuck your hands into sleeves, oyster chill seeping through indulgent warmth. Hippocras left. The vendor offers a final ladle of oyster stew on the house for your brave tongue. You accept. Sip. It's thick. Comfort in a cup. Oat and brine truce. Your tally stick scratches your palm, reminding you there are still honey cakes, almond milk jellies, saffron buns, the sweet course of this roaming feast. But first you let the river rinse your senses. Inhale tide, exhale clove ghosts. Pepper lingers as a familiar tickle, but salt now leads. You flick a shell back into the bucket. Payment for splash, superstition tithe, then step away, boots crunching on a carpet of calcium. Behind you, the oyster woman hums a work song about low-tide secrets and high-tide lies. The gull returns, wiser, and nicks a mussel instead. The fisherman laughs, tosses it a pepper flake, avian justice. You pull your cloak tight, feel the wafer cone crack slightly in your pouch, sweetness calling from the future. The alley back to the inner market slopes upward, away from river damp. As you climb, you pass a boy peddling oyster shells for charms. He swears hanging one above door keeps thieves out. You buy a tiny one, slip it beside the garlic clove, your pouch now a spice shell reliquary. Historians would raise brows. You raise none, only shoulders against wind. At the top, warmth leaks from a baker's doorway, where honey scents coil like friendly snakes. Almond milk steam fogs the glass. Your mouth, rinsed clean by brine, opens of its own accord. Time to trade salt licks for sugar licks, to let gelatin wobble where oysters slid. The river murmurs goodbye behind you, shells clicking as boots shift. You pat your stomach. Ledger heavy, but balanced. Pepper, salt, sugar, spice, smoke, herb, brine. One more notch, no, the stick might snap. Instead you notch memory. Easier to carry, harder to spill, better for dreams. Honey catches you before you even see the oven. Thick floral, a sweetness that feels round rather than sharp. You press through a knot of cloaks into a baker's spill of warmth, where trays of squat golden cakes cool on boards, their tops lacquered with a sheen that winks like candlelight. Beside them shallow basins of something pale and trembling. Almond milk jellies shimmy with each footstep on the uneven floor. Steam fogs the tiny panes, doodling sugar ghosts on the glass. Someone draws a crude bee with a fingertip and licks it off, giggling into their sleeve. A boy with flour freckles shoves a honey cake into your hand before you've managed a coin. The crust is just firm enough to crack. Inside, the crumb clings in sticky strands, perfumed with crushed coriander and a whisper of ginger. Expensive, yes, but a pinch goes a festival mile. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval cooks leaned on honey long after cane sugar arrived, especially outside elite kitchens. Recipe books like Le Ménagier de Paris list spiced honey cakes and gingerbread boiled with honey and breadcrumbs, pressed in molds and sold at fairs. Street versions, rougher, quicker, less mold and more handprint. You leave yours stamped in your palm, tacky as fresh wax. The baker's wife hovers over the jellies, ladling almond milk, cloudy, silky from a cauldron into trenchers lined with parchment. She stirs in isinglass, fish bladder gelatin with a practiced wrist, then pours the mixture into shallow molds carved with flowers. Once set, the milky discs wobble like saintly halos on a windy day. You spoon one up. It quivers, then collapses on your tongue. Cool and faintly nutty, a soft contrast to the honey cake's cling. Quirky tidbit. Some clever cooks painted almond jellies with saffron yolks to fake eggs during Lent, while others floated candied fennel seeds inside so diners could count blessings with each bite. Here, you crunch something tiny, anise maybe, popping sweetness like edible punctuation. You lick a drip off your knuckle and the baker's wife arches a brow. "We're short on napkins," she deadpans, passing you a strip of clean parchment. You pat, smear, give up. The sleeve wins again. A small ledger sits by the oven. No tally stick this time, but chalk marks on slate. Honey up, almonds scarce, she mutters, flicking a line. Historians still argue whether almond milk's medieval popularity was driven by lactose intolerance, a taste for luxury, or Lenten loopholes. Monastic records show vats of it bubbling every fast day, but merchants' letters also gush about its white richness in sauces, more status than sacrifice. Tonight, you decide it's both, piety with panache. A bearded beekeeper hat crowned with a smudge of wax, swaggered in earlier and left a block of comb the size of a hymn book. He brags that feeding bees crushed rosemary perfumes the honey. The baker's wife rolls her eyes, saying bees eat flowers, not recipes. You taste again, searching for rosemary. Maybe, or maybe suggestion is seasoning. Either way, the honey lingers, floral, almost heady enough to duel the hippocras cloves still ringing faintly at the back of your throat. Your spoon clinks the wooden rim, drawing a glance from a girl tracing patterns in spilled almond milk with her finger. She's making spirals, then licking the designs. The baker's wife sighs. There goes the spiral tray, but lets it pass. Wastage is priced into patience. A clerk nearby boasts he can tell almond milk from cows by the sheen. You resist offering to blindfold him with your sugar-stiff sleeve. One light joke slips out instead, soft as jelly. So is this vegan or just very Catholic? The baker snorts so loudly flour puffs from her nose, then swats your arm with a wooden spoon, affectionate mostly. Joke quota sealed for this round. You watch her strain new almond milk through a cloth bag, twisting until pale liquid weeps into a bowl. The leftover meal plops into a crock. Tomorrow's pottage thickener or faux cheese. Waste nothing is the market's nightly grace. She sprinkles rosewater over a pan, scent lifting like a hymn, and you flash back to wafer rose sugar, sweet chapters rhyming through the night. A lanky apprentice tries to balance 6 jellies on a board. 2 slide, 1 plops onto the floor, where a dog appears as if conjured, lapping with conviction. Saint Bernard approves, someone quips. The baker groans but shrugs. Floor dogs are cheaper than mops. You sidestep the slick spot, filing the image for later. Dream scenes need comic relief. By the hearth, a tiny pot of burnt honey bubbles into a dark syrup. For coughs, the beekeeper claims. He dips a twig, offers it to you. It smacks of molasses and smoke, clinging like gossip. He swears by it. The apothecary will too. Once he smells a profit. You chase it with almond jelly to scrub your tongue clean, a nutty eraser. The room fogs again as someone cracks the oven to pull saffron buns. Next lane's business, you note, and the air swirls with gold. You catch yourself swaying slightly, sugar warmth lapping at your brainstem like a gentle tide. A minstrel slips in, trades a cord for a honey nub. Barter continues. Music as currency, crusts as coin. In the corner, 2 nuns debate whether almond milk counts as white fasting, a loophole allowing creamy dishes without sin. One cites a bishop's letter approving it. The other insists intention matters more than ingredients. Historians still argue. Yes, but your spoon argues for more jelly. You oblige, letting it glide down throat like a prayer said half asleep. The baker's wife sprinkles crushed nuts over a tray, then taps your wrist. Taste this before it skins. You do. It's thin, sweet, and a little gritty, the milk separating as it cools. She curses softly, stirs again, muttering about ratios. Recipes are living things here, twitching under heat and haste. A boy offers candied orange peel on a pin. Why a pin? Don't ask. And you bite cautiously, resinous and bright citrus oil cutting honey's depth. The contrast pulls your senses taut again, limber for the next stall. You tuck the pin into your pouch, your poor pouch, now a junk drawer of medieval snacks. A gust sneaks through the cracked door, rattling the sugar ghost bee on the window. It drips, slides, vanishes. Outside, someone hawks saffron for pennies. A lie thicker than jelly. Inside, the almond pot gurgles. Honey cakes settle, your shoulders loosen. You are sticky, spiced, slightly glazed yourself. You scrape a finger through the jelly mold's leftover film, lick, and finally admit defeat. You're full, but curiosity still pecks like that gull at the quay. Ahead, the saffron buns glow, and beyond them, portable pottage waits. But here you linger one heartbeat more, letting honey anchor you in the hum of oven crackle and spoon clink. The beekeeper packs his comb, slipping a shard into your palm. For your sleep, he winks. You tuck it beside the oyster shell. Your pouch now smells like tide and hive, a bizarre harmony. Lavender water winces somewhere in the future. You hand back the spoon, noticing almond milk dried in translucent streaks like stained glass on wood. The baker's wife scrapes it with a knife, flicking flakes into a bowl. Tomorrow's custard, tonight's snack, she doesn't say. She just shoves another cake at you for the road, which you accept then promptly hide. Even you have limits. Out the door, the cooler air kisses sugar off your skin. A bell rings. Of course it does. Somewhere behind the Guildhall. Your feet remember the path. Saffron buns and forbidden dyes. Portable pottage in cups. The night market's leftovers reincarnated. Your tally stick flexes against its notches. You squeeze it, honey tack still wet on your fingers, and move on, sweetened, softened, but not yet asleep. The glow hits first. Little suns lined on a plank, each bun stained a brazen yellow that no humble egg yolk could conjure. The baker, different shop, same flour freckles, holds one up like contraband treasure. Real saffron, he whispers, eyes darting toward the Guildhall door. The crumb tears in slow motion, threads of gold stretching, steam wafting honey and spice. Ginger again, maybe cardamom if someone's cousin smuggled a pouch through a Flemish port. You bite, the crust sighs, the inside springs, and that unmistakable metallic floral saffron note blooms on your tongue like a crocus erupting from January mud. Mainstream historical fact: saffron was astronomically pricey in the late Middle Ages. English statutes in the 15th century punished saffron adulterers with heavy fines, and yet Cornish bakers, German feast cooks and London guild feasts all flaunted saffron breads on high days. Your bun tastes like a saint's day snuck into a Tuesday. The baker taps the tray with a peel. Colour makes people pay. He grins. A ledger leaned against the wall bears chalk marks in 3 colours: white for wheat loaves, brown for rye rounds, yellow for festival buns. He insists he files dues honestly, that the baker's company inspects weights, not hues. Historians still argue whether bread colour ever fell under sumptuary policing. Tailors got fabrics, but did bakers get dyes? Some guild bylaws mention forbidden additives, others are silent, leaving enforcement to market wardens already busy chasing short loaves and over-peppered pies. Guild ledgers disagree like squabbling cousins, some stern, some shrugging. You notice a jar near the oven labelled marigold, petals dried to saffron's shadow. Quirky tidbit: cheats sometimes stretch saffron with safflower or marigold shreds. A London pamphlet advised rubbing threads on teeth. Real saffron stains slow, fakes bleed fast. The baker winks, pinches a strand from his pouch, crushes it between oily fingers. Your nail bed blushes yellow, slow and stubborn. He smirks, the good stuff. You tear another bite and your sleeve accepts yet more grease. Honey cake tack now layered with saffron sheen. Lavender water sighs in the back of your mind. The bun's sweetness is suppler than honey cake, the spice more bass note than treble. A child tugs her mother's cuff, demanding a sun roll. The mother hesitates at the price, then buys one and divides it into 4 precise quarters. Economy lesson in pastry form. Beneath the plank, a small brazier keeps a clay pot of saffron water warm. Threads steep to paint other foods. The baker dips a brush, streaks a pale loaf for a noble's order. Nobles get more gold, he mutters, but his grin gives away the thrill of law skimming. You remember Mistress Clarion's patchwork humiliation. Dyes policed on cloth, now dyes dancing in bread. Callbacks are everywhere tonight. Colour equals class, whether on backs or buns. A bailiff wanders in, sniffing exaggeratedly. The baker slides a plain rye round into his hands on the house. Distraction via density. The bailiff chews, jaw working like a mill gear, and forgets to ask why the room smells like a spice caravan. Crisis averted. You slip your tally stick out, debating a saffron notch maybe, carve a tiny crocus. The stick creaks. You restrain yourself. Too many memories for one sliver of willow. Behind the oven, a girl grinds threads in a mortar with coarse salt so it spreads, she says. Her pestle is stained permanently yellow, a badge of golden labor. She complains her hands look jaundiced. The baker laughs, calls them prosperous. You think of mustard fingers in that London apothecary and smile. Spice stains are medieval tattoos. One light joke sidles out of you to the girl. At least if you wave, ships won't crash, lighthouse hands. She snorts so hard she nearly spills the mortar. Joke quota, spent, shelved. A scholarly type with saffron-tinged fingertips. Court argues that yellow bread inflames choleric humours. His friend counters that joy is a humour too, and saffron feeds it. Avicenna said so, maybe. The baker shrugs. If it sells, it heals. Pragmatism beats philosophy when ovens are hot. Steam from the oven fogs your vision. You wipe, smearing gold across your brow like war paint. A nun steps in, eyes wide at the colour. Feast of St. Lucy, she ventures. The baker nods solemnly, though the calendar nibbles around ordinary time. Feasts can be summoned by dough when sales need bumping. The nun buys two, scribbles the convent's name in chalk on the board. Put it on St. Benedict's tab. Accounts like buns rise in strange ways. A side tray holds saffron scraps, edges trimmed off for uniform loaves. He sells them cheaper by the handful. Kids' fingers darting like magpies after shiny bits. Your mind flashes to that magpie with the brooch, birds and bright things. Eternal partnership. You snag a scrap, chew. It's drier but dips perfectly in a nearby bowl of almond milk leftovers. Improvised dunk. Portable pottage is coming. You remind yourself. But a dip never hurt anyone. Speaking of, the baker's lad hurries through with earthen cups stacked like beehives, shouting, pottage, portable. The scent of barley and onion sneaks in. Preview of section 12. But saffron commands this room a few moments more. You pivot back as the baker douses embers with a splash from a bucket. Steam billows. Saffron vapor kisses your face, leaving you blinking golden tears. He tells a tale, perhaps true, perhaps marketing, of a saffron war in Nuremberg where thieves hijacked a shipment. Town nearly rioted. Fines rained down like flour. You nod. You've heard versions. Saffron War of 1374 is no joke in spice circles. He claims his threads came via Genoa, via Alexandria, via who knows. Saints keep the line straight, sinners keep it moving, he quips, sliding another tray in. The bun in your hand dwindles to a smear on your thumb. You lick it, taste lingering metal flour, and feel oddly cheered. Saffron reputedly lifts melancholy. Maybe that's humours, maybe it's just expensive psychology. Either way, your shoulders lighten a bit more. Outside, a bell again clangs a single warning. Last call before gate chains. You tuck a half bun in your pouch, rye pea wafer cone. Adjust your cloak and step into cooler air. The bun warmth fades slowly from your palm, like ember glow on skin. Behind you, the baker's wife from Almond Jellies ducks in. Trades a pan of set milk for 2 buns. Spice economy is tight. They talk ratios. You catch fish glue and rosewater before the door shuts, sealing secrets with heat. The street narrows into shadow, where a pottage seller ladles thick stew into earthen cups, exactly where your outline said you'd be. Your stomach lulled by saffron, readies for barley heft. Pepper ghosts, clove murmurs, oyster brine, honey glaze, all line up politely to make room. You glance at your saffron-fingered hand glowing faintly in torchlight and chuckle inwardly. Lanterns, buns and fingertips all burn gold tonight. Somewhere your tally stick size spared another scar. You slip it back, pat the pouch, a reliquary of crumbs and shells, and follow the barley steam. Behind you, the oven door shuts with finality. Iron-kissing stone. The baker slides a bar over it, trapping heat and secrets until morning. Outside, your breath fogs, tinted in your mind's eye a little yellow still. Saffron fades on your tongue, but a thread of its cheer knots itself to your memory, sturdy as a crocus root in frost. Steam bellows from a squat cauldron like a dragon trying to whisper, and the whisper smells of barley, onions, leeks and a bone that has given its all. A woman with forearms as sturdy as trestle legs ladles the thickness into small earthen cups, each cup already warm from the last serving. Mind your fingers, she chirps, passing one to you with a rag looped round its middle. The stew clings to the rim, slow as honey, but far less polite. And when you sip, it coats your tongue in savory fog. Barley chew, leek sweetness, a ghost of smoked ham snagged before a fast day could forbid it. Mainstream historical fact. For most medieval folk, pottage wasn't a side. It was the daily main, a perpetual pot into which grains, roots and scraps simmered for hours, sometimes days, on hearth edges or in street cookshops. City ordinances from London to Lubeck mention mobile cauldrons and good and honest pottage sold by the ladle to tired workers. You blow across the surface. Ripples shiver, releasing a new wave of herb thyme, perhaps pennyroyal, if the vendor believes in clearing fumes. She tips the cauldron, scraping the bottom with a wooden paddle worn thinner than a monk's patience. Thick is worth 2 farthings, she declares. Thin runs cheaper. You glance into neighbouring cups. Some stand a spoon upright. Some wobble like almond jelly, survived apocalypse. Historians still argue whether street pottage was primarily charity food for the poor, or a convenience meal for anyone without a hearth. Household accounts show servants fetching it for masters, but moralists grumbled that idle wives bought ladles instead of boiling their own. Reality, like your cup, contains a bit of everything. She snaps a lid, a wafer of rye crust over yours to keep heat in. Portable stew and edible lid, efficiency wearing carbs. Quirky tidbit. A few municipal records complain vendors rinsed and reused cups without scouring, prompting fines for foul vessels. Others suggest customers return them for a half-penny refund. Proto-deposit systems centuries before glass bottles. You eye a stack of cups with rims stained a permanent umber, wonder when they last met sand or scrubbing rushes. The vendor catches your glance, dunks a cup in a bucket, gives it a swirl that mostly redistributes flavor. You take a brave sip anyway. Your immune system will write you a thank you later or a complaint. The surface skins over quickly, so you stir with a stick the length of your finger, feeling oats drag like wet wool. A root chunk bumps your lip. Parsnip, its sweetness a surprise in the savory swamp. You chew, your teeth sink slowly, gratitude blooming for anything that isn't pepper or saffron for a change. A boy beside you insists on extra onions for courage. The vendor obliges, flinging a handful like confetti. He gulps, eyes watering heroically. Your tally stick nudges your palm, eager for another notch. You resist, one more groove, and the thing might split like an overfilled sausage. Instead, you scratch a barley grain shape with your nail, memory engraving without structural risk. The vendor notices, snorts. Counting suppers or sins, she asks. You tilt the cup in a mock toast to both, letting steam kiss your nose. A watchman ambles up, cup already in hand. Apparently tonight's patrol includes ladle stops. He asks if the bone in today's pot came from the butcher who shorted the taxman last week. She shrugs, ladles, shrugs again. Bones have no politics, only collagen. He slurps, satisfied, wanders off, grease glinting on moustache. Under the cauldron, embers glow, fed by splinters of broken crates, and she admits yesterday's trencher scraps dried hard as tiles. Remember that eel-fat trencher wedge you gave to a beggar? Its cousin might be fueling your dinner. Everything circles back here. Bread becomes fire, fire becomes stew, stew becomes story. You shift your weight. Your boot nudges a crate of earthen cups, chips on their rims like battle scars. The vendor's daughter squats nearby, rubbing sand inside one, humming a tune you heard the wafer boys whistle. Songs travel faster than carts. She holds the cup up to lamplight, shrugs, stacks it clean side up. You sip more carefully. One light joke bubbles up. Gentle as stew. If I return this cup spotless, do I get my soul back with the deposit? She cackles, nearly dropping her ladle. Your soul's in the bottom. Finish and check. Joke quota discharged. Spoon back to silence. A scholar in fur trim tastes, frowns. Needs verjuice, he pronounces, splashing some from a vial. Everyone carries condiments like daggers here. The vendor glares but shrugs when the line nods approval. The acid lifts the stew like sails catching wind. You note it for your imaginary cookbook. Portable pottage à la verjuice serves whoever arrives. Behind you, someone argues that barley is peasant fare. Another retorts wheat is for ostentation. Barley for strength. Humours, class and grain politics stew along with onions. Historians still argue whether barley pottage implied poverty or practicality. Manorial rolls rationed barley to labourers, but monastic refectories ladled it daily. Tonight, your tongue votes delicious over status. The vendor flips open a second cauldron. Thinner, greener, spring pottage, she calls it, leeks and nettles when meat is scarce. She might blend the two at shift's end, marrying thickness and virtue. A monk she recognizes gets a discount. He blesses her pot with 2 fingers, then burns the same fingers on the steam. Saints forgive, stew forgets. You reach the bottom, thicker, saltier, a sediment of barley pearls and the marrow ghost of that sacrificial bone. You scrape with the stick, coaxing last clumps like a miser counting coins. The lid wafer, now soft, becomes spoon and dessert. You fold it into the cup, gulp, smile. Portable, edible, economical, medieval engineering at its tastiest. A woman in patched blue asks for the edges, those caramelized bits clinging to pot sides. The vendor obliges with a scrape, charges a whisper more. Edge Eaters Club. You would join if not for the line behind you breathing onion impatience. You step aside, cup empty, mouth glistening warmth. She gestures to a crate. Drop it there. You obey, the cup clinking into a chorus of clay. Will she rinse? Maybe. Will tomorrow's stew taste faintly of tonight's? Definitely. Continuity isn't just for stories, it's for stockpots. You wipe your mouth with the least offensive portion of your sleeve, a shrinking archipelago, then dab lavender water, what's left of it, on your fingers. It fights valiantly against onion and bone. The scent battle is a stalemate. You accept smelling like a well-seasoned pantry. The lane beyond is quieter, many stalls shuttered, their brass kettles dim, grills cold, oils congealing into tomorrow's base. But a few embers glow, a hash pan hissing with refried everything, as your outline promised in section 13. Night leftovers beckon. Before you go, you tuck the rye lid crumb into your pouch. At this point, the pouch could feed a hamlet. A gust rattles hanging ladles like wind chimes, and the vendor secures her cauldron lid with a brick. Tomorrow's brew starts tonight, she murmurs, already tossing barley into the embers-warmed pot. Round and round, you respect the stamina. You move on belly-weighted but comforted, tongue slick with starch, mind cataloguing textures, eel slip, pie crumble, wafer snap, fritter crackle, wine warmth, sausage chew, lentil cream, oyster glide, jelly wobble, bun spring, pottage hug. Sensory bingo nearly full, but the night has one more card. Scraps reborn, musicians tipped in crusts, bells dozing. You pass a man asleep against a wall, cup clutched like a relic. A stray dog licks the rim, deposit forfeited. A constable glances, shrugs. Sleeping with stew is not a crime worth pepper. You shake your head, smile, step over a puddle reflecting a crooked moon and a saffron glow. Your tally stick, spared another cut, rests easy. You pat it, then let your hand fall to your side, cup memory warm against palm. Ahead, hash sizzles, minstrels strum, and the curfew bell dreams of final rings. You follow the hiss, feet steady now in rhythm with simmer and scrape, ready for the night market's last reheated secrets. Curfew bell groans itself hoarse, shutters thud, and yet listen, pans still whisper in the alleys where light leaks under half-closed doors. You slip into one such slit of glow and find a skillet the size of a shield snapping with tonight's biography. Eel ends, sausage crumbs, pea mash crusts, barley clumps, onion ribbons, even a rogue honeycake corner, all diced together and fried into a democratic hash. The cook cap askew, apron reading like your sleeve's cousin, wields 2 broad spatulas, flipping the jumble so fast sparks hop like fleeing fleas. He calls it all-in fry with a grin. You call it edible archaeology. He shoves a trencher shard at you, scoops a mound on top. The first bite is chaos that somehow harmonizes. Smoke from sausage, sweetness from honey crumb, sharp mustard ghost, soft lentil cream, reawakened to crisp edges, barley pearls popping like tiny pebbles under tooth. Heat welds flavors together the way a blacksmith beats scrap into a horseshoe. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval cookshops were notorious for recycling leftovers. Ordinances in London, 1381, and Paris warned against reselling stale meats and yesterday's fish, but enforcement wavered. Meanwhile, recipe collections include hashes, and rissoles, expressly intended to repurpose scraps. Waste not, fry lots. A washerwoman hovers, eyeing the pan. Thrift or threat? She asks, wrinkling her nose as a suspicious scrap sizzles. The cook jabs his spatula at a bubbling chunk. Threat to hunger, he retorts. Historians still argue whether these night hashes were culinary ingenuity or public health disasters. Court rolls list outbreaks blamed on reheated messes, yet household accounts praise clever stews that stretched meat through 2 sunsets. You chew carefully, trusting heat to murder most mischief, while acknowledging your stomach may file a complaint at cockcrow. Quirky tidbit. A chronicler from Lubeck swore some frymen kept a master pot, never fully emptied, like a sourdough starter of grease, seasoning each batch with the ghosts of meals past. This cook taps a crock by the hearth labelled old fat, ladles a spoonful in as if summoning ancestors. You watch the surface shimmer, thinking of the friar's oil, the sausage drippings, the oyster liquor, all congregating here like a midnight mass of molecules. Steam fogs your eyes, you blink, and the cook slides in chopped pickled cabbage from a jar. Vinegar flash cuts through the fat, your tongue sighs relief. He sprinkles pepper, of course, then surprise, tosses in a handful of dried currants. Sweet sparks ping against savoury, echoing almond jelly's coy sugar. Your palate nods, well trained by now in medieval mashups. One light joke bubbles, gentle as simmer. If I taste something from next week, do I get a refund in advance? He barks a laugh, nearly flinging hash onto a passing cat. Joke quota satisfied, lips back to work. A constable peeks in, helmet askew, nose twitching. Kitchen's closed, he declares weakly. The cook hands him a wedge. The law surrenders with a mouthful. He mumbles that as long as shutters look shut, pans may sizzle. Curfew becomes more guideline than gospel when bellies rumble. Your tally stick protests from your pouch, wedged against apple and oyster shell. No more notches. You rub its edge instead, letting grease from thumb gloss the grain. Memory notch it is, easier than whittling in a crowded fry den. Around you, patrons slouch on overturned barrels, clutching trencher shards like tickets. A minstrel scrapes at a lute string, the note frying in the air much like the hash. He gets paid in brown edges, the coveted bits welded to pan corners. He sucks one thoughtfully, then hums a sleepy tune that pairs surprisingly well with the sizzle. The cook barks for someone to fetch more verjuice. A boy bolts, returns with a jug, sloshing half on cobbles. He earns a splatter of hash for effort. You dip a corner of trencher into a verjuice puddle on your portion. Acid pops the fat balloon on your tongue. Balance restored for now. A woman in a patched velvet sleeve, did clarion sneak back out, negotiates for the crackle, the darkened layer stuck to the pan. The cook scrapes it with theatrical flourish, slides it to her. She chews with the reverence of a monk at matins. Edge worship is real. You co-sign quietly. In the corner, a man stirs a smaller pan. Tomorrow's pottage starter, as predicted. Hash scraps melt into barley stock. Continuity thick as stew. Waste nothing. Refrain ritualized. The scent promises Section 12's remnants will fuel somebody else's. Section 1. Cycles comfort even as grease coats. Someone coughs, wet, tired. The apothecary pops in like a moth to flame, offers a lozenge of honeyed herbs. The cook rolls his eyes, ladles extra hash instead. Different cures, same price. The coffer takes both, hedging bets between sugar and skillet. A bucket under the table catches drip. Fat, verjuice, spilled cider, sludge of the night. The cook will skim the top in the morning, toss the rest for lamps or soap. You shudder at the thought of washing sleeves yours in tonight's runoff, but medieval economies laugh at squeamishness. Lavender water clutches its pearls and faints. Heat wanes, coals crust over. The cook flattens the last spoonful thin to crisp. He calls it bark. He breaks it with bare fingers, taps a bit into your palm. It shatters, shards lodging between teeth. Pepper exploding like fireworks held in check all night. You grin, lips shining in torch-blurred light. The alley whispers, shutters settling, rats beginning shift, bells dozing. A single triangle ding from far off, wafer boys calling it quits. The cook hums their tune, slower, as he scrubs the pan with coarse salt. Clean enough, not clean, clean. Tomorrow's flavors require a head start. You stack your greasy trencher shard onto a heap destined for pig or fire, wipe fingers on a rag whose original color history could fund a chronicle, and step back into cooler dark. Steam ghosts follow, then fade. Your stomach registers fullness like a town ledger closing, ink thick, margins crowded, totals balanced. But your mind remains awake, curious for the softer edges of night. Minstrels tipped in crusts, bells ringing in dreams, pilgrim remedies burbling toward sunrise. Section 14 waits with music and barter, but first you breathe, slow, letting hash settle like sediment in a calm cup. Behind, the cook kicks ash over embers, lids his fat crock, and drapes a cloth over the pan as if tucking it into bed. "See you at prime," he murmurs to nobody, or maybe to the kettle. You smile. Pans need lullabies too. You glide through the alley seam, shoulders brushing damp stone, ears catching the tail of a lute arpeggio. The night thins to a threadbare hush, pierced only by cat yowls and the distant lap of river. Hash smoke clings to your cloak like a final hand on your sleeve. You pat it, grateful and slightly ashamed, like thanking a messy friend for a good laugh. At the square's edge, a lantern gutters. You cup your hand to shield it. Habit. Then remember you're not the lamplighter. Still, the reflex says something. You've become caretaker of tonight's flavors, steward of grease and spice, archivist of crumbs. Your tally stick presses reassurance against your ribs. One more section, two more, then wind down. Pillow soon, but first a minstrel and a scrap of pie crust as currency. You taste pepper one last time, softer now, blended into barley echo. The juice tickles the back of your throat. Honey whispers from a molar crevice. Oyster brine has fled. Saffron lingers like a sun after image. Lentil garlic hums basso. You swallow, smile, pull your cloak close, and follow the music. The lute finds you before you find him. 3 notes, soft as bread crust, soaking in pottage, vibrating through the alley like steam slipping past a lid. You round the corner, and there they are. 2 minstrels sharing a stool, one cradling a lute patched with wax, the other pumping a tiny bellows for a reed pipe that wheezes but refuses to die. A shawled woman keeps time with a spoon against a crock, her rhythm as steady as your tally stick tapping your ribs. They're not busking for coins so much as for crumbs. A half-pie lid, a sausage nub, a honeycake flake, all piled on a napkin that was once white and now tells tonight's menu in stains. You add your trencher edge, still glossed with verjuice and hash, and the lute player tips his head in thanks, segueing into a melody that tastes like saffron if sound could taste. Warm, lingering, a little smug. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval urban centers kept official waits. Town musicians who played from towers at set hours and at civic feasts, while countless wandering minstrels and gleemen hustled taverns and markets for payment in ale, bread or the occasional farthing. Guild records from London list minstrels receiving loaves and candles at Christmas. Royal household roles give them robes and leftover roast. Tonight's duo fits the unofficial class. No livery, just calloused fingers and a basket of crusts. The reed pipe squeals, then settles, and the spoon taps shuffle into a nocturne. Your eyelids hum along with. The woman grins, revealing a missing tooth shaped like a comma. "Got that from a bad eel bone," she says between beats. You grin back, eel memories still peppering your sleeve. Quirky tidbit. Some minstrels reportedly carried tiny trained monkeys or dancing dogs to up their tip game. One Paris ordinance banned beasts in alehouses after a spaniel stole a bishop's pastry. These 3 have only each other and a rhythm that makes your shoulders go loose as a boiled lentil. Around their circle, a small economy hums. A baker's boy trades a heel for a tune in a key his sweetheart likes. A washerwoman promises a patched doublet if the pipe player serenades her sick son tomorrow. The lute man nods, scribbling on the back of a spice wrapper, music bookings tracked in sugar smears. You dab your own thumb into honey on their cloth, half apology, half pledge. Historians still argue whether minstrels occupied a respected niche as bearers of news and genealogy, or were lumped with vagabonds and punished under vagrancy laws. Municipal records fine unlicensed players, yet abbeys pay them for feast day cheer. The truth threads like lute strings, taut, frayed, resonant. Your light joke sneaks out softer than the reed. If I tip you in mustard, will the song cure my hiccups again? The spoon woman laughs so hard she misses a beat, then raps your knuckles lightly with her utensil. No refunds for cured ailments, she winks, tapping back into tempo. Joke quota, checked, shelved, back to listening. They shift tunes as food shifts hands. A cartwright drops a sausage chip. Out comes a jig, brisk enough to shake pepper from lips. A seamstress offers a saffron crumb. The lute rolls into something golden and languid. You swear you feel the note fray like saffron thread on your tongue. The reed player closes his eyes on high notes, cheeks puffing like tiny bellows. In the background, a sleepy watchman leans against a post, half dozing, head nodding in time. Even law can't resist a lullaby. You sink to a crate, pottage warmth settling into marrow, hash crisp still wedged molar deep. The music threads through your breath, slowing it, smoothing edges like skimmed fat. The spoon taps soften, turning from rhythm to heartbeat. The lute's final chord hangs in the air, then melts, leaving only your own inhale. The spoon woman flips her crock, revealing a stash of beet chips, what remains of a failed frying experiment. She slides you one. It's leathery, sweet, unexpected. You crunch quietly, beet sugar painting your tongue crimson under saffron's gold, a palate fit for a saint's window. She nods approvingly. Waste nothing, remember, echoing the pottage vendor's mantra. Continuity tastes like root veggies tonight. A boy in a ragged cap offers to carry tunes door to door for a crumb commission. The lute player gives him a refrain to whistle. The boy sprints off, cheeks puffed, feet slapping cobbles. Mobile marketing, medieval style. The reed man coughs dry, stubborn. You instinctively reach for your pouch's honey shard. He breaks it, lets it melt under his tongue, sighs with such relief you feel it in your earlobes. Payment flows both ways. You've tipped the band tips your conscience. Pepper pricks your throat one last time, this time escorted out by honey. In the distance, a bell notifies the last tavern shutter. Bells always bells. Curfew, penance, exile, buns, minstrels. Tonight's soundtrack could be titled For Whom the Bell Fries. You smirk internally, keeping that pun where it belongs, inside. Lavender water, trapped in your pouch's aromatic purgatory, applauds silently. The musicians pack up with a ritual as tender as prayer. The lute slides into a sack padded with old trencher cloths. The reed is wiped with a sleeve already hopeless. The spoon slips into a belt like a dagger. The crock of crusts gets tied with string. Tomorrow's breakfast secured. They bow, not to you, but to the spot where they played, as if honoring the stones for holding echoes. You bow your head a fraction, shared gratitude, shared fatigue. They vanish into a side passage, notes lingering like steam from closed lids. You stand, joints whispering, cloak heavier by crumbs and scent. Only one stall flickers now, someone selling mint posset. Your promised sunrise remedy. Section 15 waits there, with bellyaches soothed and shutters clacking. But before you go, you glance at your tally stick. You don't notch, there's no groove for music. Instead you tap it twice, letting the sound mark memory. Wood remembers better than parchment when grease is involved. Feet carry you past the square where earlier you dodged eel sparks and pie rhymes. Now it's empty, save for a cat licking a pie tin, clean, tail curled like a treble clef. The cat pauses, sneezes pepper, resumes. A gutter trickles leftover cider, like a tiny brook reflecting torch stub halos. You skirt the puddle, noting apple peel swirling with onion slivers, a stew unto itself. A tired guard yawns, doesn't bother ushering you home. You look like you belong to the night now. Peppered, honeyed, saffroned, brined. He waves half-heartedly, hand smelling of sausage. You wave back with your mustard fingerprint, a cosmology of condiments acknowledging each other. The wind shifts, colder, sliding through alleys like a thief after scraps. You hug your cloak, chest humming with lute resonance, stomach steady under barley ballast. The posset seller's torch sputters ahead, mint rising like fresh laundry in spring. Remedy, ritual, release. You pace toward it, steps syncing with a beat only you still hear, spoon taps echoing in bone. Behind you the alley retires. A rat darts, a door bar drops, a coal sighs its last. Ahead a cup waits, your bed trails close, and sleep stretches its arms. One more sip, one more sensory stanza, then the wind down can sew the night shut, stitching saffron to oyster shell, pepper to honey, music to steam. Mint steam curls from a narrow-necked pot like a green sigh, and you drift toward it, belly humming with everything you've asked it to store. The posset seller, hair in a kerchief, the colour of old pewter, tilts her ladle, letting a ribbon of warm milk, ale and bruised mint leaves pour into a clay cup already rimmed with honey. She taps a pinch of grated nutmeg on top, because of course nutmeg sneaks in for an encore, and presses the cup into your hands. Heat seeps through, soothing the sausage ache, the oyster chill, the saffron buzz, a lullaby you can drink. Mainstream historical fact: posset was a common medieval nightcap. Hot milk curdled with ale or wine, sweetened and spiced, prescribed for indigestion and sleeplessness in household manuals from England to Italy. Physicians recommended versions with egg yolks for strength. Householders swore by mint or anise to calm a riotous gut. You sip curds, kiss your lips, soft as almond jelly, without the wobble. Mint cuts through the leftover garlic hum, clearing your throat like a polite broom. A woman beside you mutters that her grandmother tossed in breadcrumbs to catch the bile. The seller nods, sliding a crust in one cup, calling it filtering the humours. Quirky tidbit: one 15th century recipe advises adding crushed hartshorn, yes deer antler, to posset for nightmares. Another swears a single clove stuck in the cup wards off night goblins. You glance around, only cats and constables here, but you accept the clove anyway, tucking it in like a talisman. Historians still argue whether posset was medicine first and dessert second, or simply a cozy excuse to drink after curfew. The seller says with a wink, as if she's read ahead in your script. Account books list posset expenses under physic, yet banquet menus slide it in between courses. Tonight, it's both doctor and dessert, healer and hug. You ease onto an overturned bucket, cup warming your palms, steam fogging what's left of your lavender courage. Around you, stalls surrender, eel brazier lids clang shut, pie chests latch, wafer irons stacked like sleeping shields, the friar's oil pan turned upside down to drip into tomorrow. The sausage man hoists his fat crock like a baby, the lentil lady scrapes caramelized garlic into a jar, the oyster woman sluices her table with a bucket of river water, sending shell grits skating into gutters. Shutters clap one by one, a wooden applause marking the market's curtsy tonight. Your light joke slips out, softer than steam. If this mint posset fails, do I sue the mint or the milk? The seller snorts, nearly ladling your nose. Sue the cow, she says. She can't run far. Joke quota done. Mouth returns to sipping, ears to savouring silence. A stray rooster, yes, that indefatigable clock, rustles under a bench, confused, perhaps drunk on dropped hippocras. A constable stomps by, belly lined with pottage, announcing last patrol with all the menace of a tired cat. He waves at your cup. Medicinal, he asks. You nod solemnly. He salutes with a yawn. Law gives way to lactose. Your tally stick rests inside your cloak, heavy with invisible grooves. Eel, pie, wafer, fritter, wine, sausage, lentil, oyster, jelly, saffron bun, pottage, hash, music. No room left for mint, so you let the flavour etch itself directly into memory. Wood would crack, mind just softens. The seller sprinkles dried mint over a cooling pan, humming a tune the minstrels played. You join on a hum, barely audible, your breath-setting mint motes dancing in lamplight. She slides you a second half cup for the road, though the road now ends at your bed. You sip slower, tongue tracing nutmeg ridges, clove spine, honey gloss. A bell faint, almost embarrassed, ticks twice. Not exile, not curfew, just the abbey's sleepy signal. Its echo rides the river breeze, stroking the edges of alleys now emptied to cats and embers. You inhale, mint sharp, milk sweet, exhale a pepper ghost, finally drifting off. Vendors drift past, bundles on backs, pans clanking softly. The friar carrying his rake like a pilgrim staff, the baker's wife with almond moulds rattling in a sack, The butcher's boy rolling a barrel, humming a tune about rosemary bees, the waferer's triangle chiming once in farewell. They look smaller without braziers' halos, human-sized in the cool. You lift your cup to each. They nod, sleep in their eyes, profit in their pockets, grease on their cuffs. You swallow the last sip. A curd nestles at the bottom like a tiny pillow. You tip it onto your tongue, let it melt, a coda note. The seller takes your cup, drops it in a bucket, reading rinse in chalk. The question mark is honest. She stretches, spine popping, banks the brazier with ash, and tucks a mint bunch under her kerchief like a feather. Home, she says to no one, then to you. Sweet dreams, mind the gutters, sound advice in any century. You rise, joints creaking pleasantly, cloak heavy with scents, pockets bulging with edible relics. Cobblestones glisten with a thin sheen of condensed night market ale, fat brine, sugar, turned alchemical varnish under moonwash. Your boots slide once, then find purchase, your hand instinctively steadying on a wall still warm where ovens breathed. As you step toward your pallet, real or imagined, you feel the city exhale, fires banked, bells muted, bellies full. Your own breath matches it, longer now, deeper, each inhale tasting less of pepper and more of sleep. The magpie with the brooch doesn't show, but a silver fish scale glints near a drain. You leave it, it belongs to tomorrow's child with a pocket to fill. Mint lingers in your throat, milk settles under ribs, and a wave of heaviness, kind and slow, ripples from shoulders to ankles. You think briefly of tally sticks and gremolata of grease on your sleeve. Then even that thought softens, edges blur like steam on glass. You're ready. Let the market pack itself into dreams. Let the bells ring inward. Let the spoon tap turn to heartbeat, the lute to breath, the frying hiss to distant rain. You close your eyes the way a stall shutters, gentle, practiced, sure. Set the cup down. Feel its gentle warmth fade from your fingers, and let your hands grow still. The alley hushes behind you, and even the last curls of steam loosen, disappearing into the soft dark-like thoughts that decide they're done for the day. Breathe in slowly through your nose. There's only a faint trace of mint now, a whisper of honey, a memory of clove, and then sigh it out, longer than before, like pushing a door closed until it clicks. Picture the market empty, torches snuffed, braziers tucked under ash, stalls fold into shadow, and crumbs that once meant a meal become nothing more than quiet dots on stone. The cat curls on a warm sill, the rooster finally forgets the time, and the river's murmur evens into a lull that brushes the quay's stones smooth. Every scent that chased you, pepper sparks, saffron sun, oyster salt, thins to a pleasant blur, the way colors blend on the inside of your eyelids. Your steps grow lighter, slower, softer, as if you're walking not on cobbles but on the steam itself, buoyed by it, carried gently toward a doorway that opens without creak. Inside, the room is dim, the straw pallet forgiving, the blanket a little rough but always warm enough once you settle. Muscles let go one by one, shoulders sink, jaw loosens, hands unclench. Behind your ribs, your heart adopts the spoon's easy rhythm. Tap, 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 steady, calm, unrushed. Let any leftover crackle of the hash, any clove tingle, any eel pepper tickle, dissolve like sugar stirred into warm milk. Let your thoughts drift the way flecks of barley drifted to the bottom of the cup, settling, settling, until the surface is smooth and still. Eyes heavy now, breathing slower, you can barely feel the blanket's weight, only its promise. Nothing else to taste, nothing else to tally. Just rest, deep, even, quiet. All is well. Sleep.